Agora is a crisis center that takes calls about anything from anyone.
Yeah, exactly. That's prevention right there.
I always think of us as sort of the little engine that could.
That's the definition of empathy.
The calls just started pouring in, and so did volunteers.
Welcome, everybody, to the Lifeline Crisis Center Director Interview Series. Today, I'm here with Molly McCoy Brack from the Agora Crisis Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're very excited to have you, Molly. I'm so excited that you decided to help us out with this and to join us for this interview series. Why don't we start with a little bit about you? What's your story? What kind of brought you to suicide prevention and the crisis center world?
Well, when I was getting my master's degree in counseling in my 20s, everyone in the program said, you know, if you want good training and some good experience, you should go over to this Agora place and volunteer. And they are nice people and it's good work. So I did that, started volunteering in 1991. And I was on the board of directors for a while, and I sat on the phones for many years. And then in the year 2000, they called and asked me if I would take over as director of the organization. Agora is a crisis center that takes calls about anything from anyone. And so suicide itself is maybe 20% of our callers are talking about suicide. Maybe 5% are, at imminent risk. But I discovered that getting more involved in suicide prevention was a way to get us grant money, frankly, because it's difficult to find people that want to fund you for listening, because they don't always understand, like we do, how helpful listening is. And so the suicide prevention part of it, I really got into through that route to begin with. And then we helped found the New Mexico Suicide Prevention Coalition and went from there. And once I got involved in that world and realized really the scope of the problem and what was involved in suicide prevention, I just became more active and more interested in it. And here I am today.
That's great. And one of the really important things I think you mentioned too, is that, and I think a lot of crisis centers probably experience this with their callers, is that not everybody is calling specifically in imminent crisis. They're not in danger of hurting or trying to kill themselves in the moment. A lot of people are just calling to have someone to listen.
To talk. And we really firmly believe that people having somewhere that they can call and just talk about whatever's on their mind. They've had a bad day, they're lonely, they've had a bad breakup or whatever is going on. For them to be able to call and talk about that in the moment as it's happening before it snowballs into a suicide crisis, like that is suicide prevention to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's prevention right there.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what are some of the highlights of your crisis center? What are some really big successes that you want to share?
I always think of us as sort of the little engine that could. We are an unusual model because we are a student organization at the University of New Mexico. For 30 years, we kind of chugged along as a student organization, which we still are, but our entire budget for the year was maybe $5,000. Now, when I came in as director, there had been some shuffling around campus, and we had maybe 10 volunteers left, and we're taking a call a day or something. I think that year we took about 1,200 calls, actually. So our big success is that today we have 200 volunteers, and we take 30,000 calls a year and chats. And so we've really grown exponentially in the last 15, 17 years. And a lot of that is because we've been able to get recognition in the community. And the thing that I always brag about the most at Agora is that our volunteers. So volunteers answer our phones, and most of them are students at the University of New Mexico. Now, I do training 3 times a year on the trimester schedule. And every time we train, we have a class of about 50 people, which is pretty great. Yeah. But we turn away like 100 people. So to me, that there's 150 people in our community 3 times a year, mostly college students, who want to give up 4 Saturdays to listen to me talk all day, that's one thing. And then they are saying, yeah, I'll come in for 4 hours every week for at least a year just to help strangers in distress. Like, I think that is amazing, and I think it's such a testament to the heart of our community.
Yeah, I mean, the power of volunteers, we hear about this a lot, is just critical to a lot of the services that crisis centers provide. Within that same kind of time period, or even on a longer time period, and on the flip-flop, are there any barriers to these successes? I know you mentioned funding as being a big thing, and probably a lot of crisis centers experience that as a little barrier. But are there any other things and any other challenges that have kind of popped up?
Well, I think for us, being a student organization at the university has pluses and minuses. So, advantages include we don't pay rent. We don't pay for our insurance and things like that, and our utilities. All of that's taken care of. The disadvantage is that sometimes outside funders will say, well, you're part of the university. Don't you have a bunch of money? Don't they fund you? And we're like, no, they actually don't get the only money we get from the university is my salary. And then the student government of the university gives me, some money to hire those work study students and basically keep the phones on. So funding is always a challenge, as it is for every center I've ever visited. Mm-hmm. Ours is kind of a unique model. And so sometimes that's a challenge for us. Because we're a student organization, we have to be student governed. So okay. This is another weird and interesting part of our structure, is that my immediate board of directors are students who are volunteers at the center. Now, ultimately, my board of directors is the regents of the university, but they know we exist and they're supportive, but they don't really ever come over and check on us or anything. So we have to be student governed. And so that's really, actually, it's a pretty great thing, because it gives the students that volunteer for me such wonderful experience. And to me, in addition to the work we do on the phones and chat, which I'm really proud of course, I think the thing that's having just as big an impact on the world is the training that we give our volunteers. We train that like 150 or so volunteers a year, and they, hopefully they stick around and volunteer for a few years, but they're going to also take those skills and knowledge out into the world, and they're going to be better clinicians, they're going to be better parents and better partners. And so I really feel like the training that crisis centers provide volunteers has such a wide-reaching impact, in addition to the work we do on the phone. It's funny because I run into people, of course, around town, but one time I was in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm sitting down at a blackjack table. I sit next to this guy, and people are, where are you from? What do you do? And I said, I'm from Albuquerque. I run a crisis center there. And he said, that's funny. I used to volunteer for a crisis center there called Agora. It was the best thing I ever did.
Knowing that these people then branch out, because they're university students, they either may not be from there, or their paths take them out into places around the country and around the world. Mm-hmm. You're spreading that goodness all over. So we've already talked a lot about successes, barriers, the model that Agora has, and the uniqueness and your relationship with the university. Is there something else? Is there one thing that you kind of want to mention that makes your center like especially unique?
We've really stuck to that original sort of grassroots model, that we don't limit the amount of time people can call. And then we have, like all crisis centers, we have some folks that are familiar to us and call us regularly, and they will have limits sometimes, but we definitely encourage them to keep calling us. And so a lot of our callers, the feedback we get from them is that they love being able to just call and chat and not feel rushed, and not worry that if they say the word suicide, they're going to have the police at their door immediately. And so that sort of supportive listening model, and the most important part of it is that connection with another person. And we really hold on to that, even though it means we don't take as many calls as a lot of other centers. We're okay with that. I talked to my volunteer at one point about, do we want to start triaging calls, where if you're on the phone with one person and the other line rings, you put them on hold and check on this person, and then you have to let somebody go, right? Mm-hmm. And my volunteers were horrified. They said, no, it might make that person feel like they weren't as important as the other one. And so I loved that that was the first thought on their mind, was that they wanted the caller to feel as important as any other caller.
That's the definition of empathy, like thinking of the other person. Like, that's really great. That's awesome. Yeah. How does collaboration with the Lifeline benefit Agora? How does it help your center?
Being connected to the network is such a rich source of wisdom and knowledge and friends. I mean, I've made so many of my closest friends I've met, through this world. And then Contact USA accreditation, that's all blended together also in connecting us with other agencies and the friends that I've made, and really just learning from each other and supporting other directors. So being part of a network has been great for us. And it also, gives us some credibility in our community, I'd say, and we're proud of it. We're proud to be able to say that we're part of a national network.
One of the things that we talk about at the Lifeline a lot is, how do you be the one to play a role in suicide prevention in your community? And a lot of people play that role as an individual or as a parent, as a sibling. What is the way that you imagine or that you feel Agora plays that role?
We try to be part of that web of services in the community that tries to keep people safe and try to keep people out of the hospital and off the streets. And, some days just having someone who's going to be kind to you and listen to you for a few minutes a day might be the thing that keeps you alive, and so we really try to be part of that community in our state.